They looked at me like I was nothing. Just another orphan girl scrubbing their floors, washing their sheets. Invisible to everyone except when they needed something. The two sons would laugh, tell me I didn't belong, that a girl like me should know her place. But what they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that their father saw something different. And the day that lawyer opened the envelope and read those words out loud, their faces went white as the linens I used to fold. This is my story. My name is Rose Marie, and I'm writing this down because someone needs to remember what really happened. Not the version they tell at parties, not the gossip that spreads through town, but the truth. The whole truth about how a 23-year-old orphan girl became the owner of the finest hotel in the city. It was 1927 when this story begins, though really it started years before that. I had been working at the Grand Remington Hotel since I was 17. 6 years of making beds, polishing brass, scrubbing bathrooms until my hands cracked and bled. 6 years of being invisible. You have to understand something about that time. Women like me, we didn't have choices. We didn't go to college. We didn't own businesses. We certainly didn't sit in offices making decisions. We cleaned, we cooked, we served. And if we were lucky, we married someone who treated us decent. That was the dream they sold us. But I never minded the work. Not really. There was something peaceful about turning a messy room into something clean and welcoming, something honest about it. And Mr. Franklin noticed. The owner himself, 70 years old with silver hair and kind eyes, would stop and talk to me, ask my opinion about things. Little things at first. Should we change the soap in the rooms? What did guests complain about most? Then bigger things. He listened when nobody else did. His sons, though, William and Charles Franklin, they didn't listen to anyone except their own appetites. And they made sure I knew exactly where I stood in their world. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it really begins.
The problem with William and Charles wasn't that they were cruel, though they were. It wasn't that they were lazy, though Lord knows they never worked a day in their lives. The real problem was that they believed they were owed everything simply because of whose sons they were. William was the older one, 32, always dressed in expensive suits that cost more than I made in 6 months. He had this way of looking through you, like you weren't quite real. I remember one morning I was changing the flowers in the lobby, fresh white roses, Mr. Franklin's favorite, when William walked past with his friends. "Still here, Rose?" he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Thought you'd have found a husband by now. Or are you planning to die in this hotel, arranging flowers nobody notices?" His friends laughed. I kept arranging the flowers. Charles was worse in different ways. Younger by 3 years, always gambling, always spending. He'd bring women to the hotel, different ones every week, and leave the rooms in states I won't describe in detail. Then he'd see me in the hallway with my cleaning cart and say things like, "That's all you're good for, isn't it? Cleaning up other people's messes?" Sometimes he'd drop money on the floor in front of me, make me bend down to pick it up while he laughed. I learned to swallow my words, learned to keep my face blank. Because girls like me, we couldn't afford to talk back, couldn't afford to lose our jobs. Where would I go? Back to the orphanage? Sleep on the streets? So I smiled when I had to, stayed quiet when I should, and did my work better than anyone else. But Mr. Franklin saw it, all of it. I didn't know that then, but he saw how his sons treated me, saw how they treated everyone who worked for them, and it disappointed him deeply. "Rose," he told me one afternoon in his office. He'd called me up to discuss new curtains for the guest rooms. "My sons think money makes a man, But I've learned something in 70 years. Character makes a man or a woman. And character isn't about where you start. It's about what you do with what you're given. I nodded, not really understanding what he meant. Not yet. But 3 months later, everything changed. Mr. Franklin collapsed in the hotel restaurant during Sunday dinner. The doctor came, did what he could. By midnight, the owner of the Grand Remington Hotel was gone.
The funeral was the biggest I'd ever seen. Everyone in the city came. Politicians, businessmen, society ladies in black veils. I stood in the back of the church in my only good dress, the navy one I bought used 2 years ago. William and Charles sat in the front row, wearing their grief like expensive coats they'd take off the moment they got home. I cried, though, really cried, because Mr. Franklin had been the closest thing to family I'd had since I was 7 years old. He remembered my birthday, asked how I was feeling when I caught the flu, treated me like I mattered. The week after the funeral was strange. The hotel felt empty, even though it was full of guests. William and Charles were already acting like owners, strutting around, making plans. I heard them talking one night when I was cleaning the hallway near Mr. Franklin's old office. "Finally," William was saying, "finally we can do what we want with this place. Sell it maybe. Take the money and move to New York. Or Paris," Charles added. "Live like we're supposed to live, not stuck in this boring town running a hotel." "What about the staff?" someone asked. I think it was their lawyer, Mr. Peterson. "Fire most of them. Especially that orphan girl. What's her name? Rose. She's always around, makes me uncomfortable, like she thinks she's part of the family or something." They laughed. I stood frozen in the hallway, dust cloth in my hand, heart pounding. That's when I knew I needed to start looking for another job, start planning. Because in 2 weeks, Mr. Peterson was scheduled to read the will officially. And after that, William and Charles would own everything, and I would be out on the street. I started asking around quietly, other hotels, restaurants, even private homes looking for help. But nothing paid as well as the Grand Remington, and most places weren't hiring. The economy was good that year, but that didn't mean there were jobs for orphan girls with no education and no references except from a dead man. The night before the will reading, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my small room on the hotel's top floor, the staff quarters, and thought about everything I was losing. Not just the job, but the only home I'd known as an adult. The routine that made me feel safe, the guests who knew my name, the small dignity I'd built for myself, one perfectly made bed at a time. I wrote in my diary that night, "Tomorrow they'll make it official. Tomorrow William and Charles become my bosses for real. And the day after that, I'll probably be gone. I should hate them, but mostly I just feel tired. Tired of always being on the outside looking in. Tired of working so hard and still having nothing. Tired of people thinking I'm nothing just because I started with nothing." But Mr. Franklin believed in me. He saw something. Even if nobody else ever does, at least one person thought I was worth his time. I'll try to remember that when I'm looking for my next job. I had no idea that across town, in a safe in Mr. Peterson's office, there was a document that would change everything. A document that would prove Mr. Franklin hadn't just seen something in me. He'd bet everything on it.
The reading was scheduled for 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. I wasn't planning to go. Why would I? I was just the help. But that morning, Mr. Peterson's secretary found me in the laundry room and said Mr. Peterson needed me at the reading. Required me to be there, actually. "There must be a mistake," I told her. "I'm not family." "Mr. Peterson was very clear," she said. 2 o'clock, Mr. Franklin's office. Don't be late." So I went.
changed out of my work uniform into that same navy dress, washed my face and hands, braided my hair. My stomach felt like I'd swallowed stones. When I walked into that office, William and Charles were already there, sitting in the leather chairs like kings on thrones. They looked at me like I'd crawled out from under the floorboards. "What is she doing here?" William asked Mr. Peterson. "She's mentioned in the will," Mr. Peterson said calmly, settling behind the desk with a thick envelope. "Everyone mentioned must be present. That's the law." Charles laughed. "What, did father leave her his pocket watch? A nice tip for 6 years of service?" "Let's begin," Mr. Peterson said, ignoring him. He opened the envelope, pulled out several pages of thick paper, and started reading. The first part was standard. Personal items to friends, donations to charities, that sort of thing. William and Charles weren't paying much attention. They were waiting for the big part. The hotel, the money, the properties. Then Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. "To my sons, William and Charles Franklin, I leave the sum of $5,000 each." Silence. Complete silence. "Wait," said William slowly. 5,000 each? That's nothing. Where's the hotel, the investments, Let me finish," Mr. Peterson said. "And I left," he read. "I have watched my sons become men I do not recognize, men who value money over character, pleasure over responsibility, cruelty over kindness. I have given them every advantage, and they have squandered each one. Therefore, I leave them enough to start over, to build something with their own hands, to learn what work truly means. If they learn these lessons, they will have gained more than any inheritance I could provide." Charles stood up. "This is insane. He was old, confused. This will is completely legal and witnessed by 3 attorneys. Sit down, Charles." My heart was pounding. I wanted to disappear. This was family business, private shame, and I shouldn't be witnessing this. But Mr. Peterson kept reading. "To Rosemary Thompson, who has shown more integrity in 6 years than most people show in a lifetime, who has worked without complaint, who has treated others with dignity regardless of their station, who has proven that character is not born but built through daily choices." I stopped breathing. "To has amply proven, I leave the entirety of the Grand Remington Hotel, including the building, the land, all furnishings, and operational accounts. She is to assume full ownership immediately upon my death, with all legal rights and responsibilities thereof." The room spun. I heard the words, but they didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. "No," said William. He wasn't yelling. His voice was quiet, shocked. "No, this is fraud. This is your father's final wish," Mr. Peterson said firmly. "Miss Thompson, do you accept this inheritance?" I couldn't speak, couldn't move. The 2 men who had spent years making me feel small, telling me I was nothing, who had laughed at me and degraded me and made me want to disappear, they were staring at me with expressions I'd never seen before. Horror, disbelief, and something else, fear. Because suddenly I wasn't the maid anymore. I wasn't the orphan girl who cleaned their messes and swallowed her words. I was their landlord. "Yes," I whispered. Then, stronger, "Yes, I accept." The weeks that followed were the strangest of my life. Mr. Peterson helped me understand the legal documents, the bank accounts, the responsibilities. The hotel was mine, truly mine. The building I'd scrubbed and polished for 6 years now had my name on the deed. William and Charles tried everything. They threatened to sue. They claimed their father was senile, that I'd manipulated him somehow. But Mr. Franklin had been thorough. He documented everything. His meetings with 3 different lawyers, his mental evaluations proving he was sound of mind, even written letters explaining his reasoning. He'd known his sons would fight, and he'd made sure they couldn't win. Within a month, the brothers had burned through most of their $5,000. Gambling debts, fancy dinners, trying to maintain the lifestyle they thought they deserved. They'd been living in the family mansion, but that had been sold to pay estate taxes. They had nowhere to go. I could have let them struggle, let them sleep on friends' couches, let them learn the hard way what it meant to have nothing. God knows they deserved it after how they'd treated me, how they'd treated everyone they considered beneath them. But that's not what Mr. Franklin taught me. He didn't show me kindness so I could hoard it. He showed me kindness so I could pass it on. So I made them an offer. A small room in the hotel, nothing fancy, 2 beds and a bathroom, in exchange for work, real work. William would help with maintenance, repairs, carrying luggage. Charles would work the front desk, handle reservations, clean rooms when we were short-staffed. Regular hours, regular duties, just like every other employee. "You want us to be servants?" William asked, his face red. "I want you to be useful," I told him. "Your father left you enough to start over somewhere else if you want, but if you stay here, you work, same as everyone else, same as I did." They took the offer, not gracefully, not happily, but they took it, and slowly, very slowly, something changed. William got better at fixing things, started taking pride in repairing a broken lamp or unclogging a drain. Charles learned guests' names, started actually helping them instead of just taking their money. They're not perfect. Some days Charles complains, some days William looks at me with resentment in his eyes, but they're learning. Learning what their father tried to teach them their whole lives. And me? I still make beds sometimes. Still arrange flowers in the lobby, not because I have to, but because I want to remember. Remember where I came from. Remember that the girl who had nothing became the woman who had everything, not because she was given it, but because she earned it. One small choice at a time, one honest day of work after another. That's what Mr. Franklin saw in me, and that's what I see when I look in the mirror now. Rosemarie's story reminds us that character outlasts cruelty, and kindness creates legacies money never could. If her journey moved you, the next video shows another untold story from this golden era that'll surprise you even more.